name is Kathy, and today I'll be continuing the course for music theory. But before I do this, I wanted to let you know that because I have a great many videos now on many different topics, that I've decided to make several different video playlists so that it's easier to find the videos of greatest interest. So please check out my playlist page. This course breaks up into three major parts. The first part is basic music theory. The second part is arranging music. And the third part is music composition. So let's move on to notes and rest values in music. A single musical sound is written as a note. The two most important things that a written piece of music needs to tell you about a note are its pitch, that's how high or how low it is, and its duration, how long the note will last. The pitch of a written note is determined by the clef that is used and its location on the staff. To find out the duration of the written note, you look at what that note looks like, and this determines the time value of that note. Another consideration in music is the concept of no sound, which is indicated by musical rests. Rests in music have specific time values and are shown by their shape. Let's take a closer look at the parts of a written note, and these parts determine how long a note will last. The pitch of the note depends only on what line or space the head of the note is on. In this diagram, we have the components of a note: the head of the note, filled and not filled in, the stem of the note, and the flag of the note, and the dot. All of these parts affect how long the note will last. If a note does not have a head, it does not have one definite pitch. Such a note may be a pitchless note, like a drum beat or a hand clap. The note may also have or not have a stem, one or more flags, beams connecting it to other notes, or one or more dots following the head of the note. All of these things affect how much time the note is given in the music. The simplest looking note with no stems or flags is called a whole note. All other note lengths are defined by how long they last compared to a whole note. A note that lasts half as long as a whole note is a half note. A note that lasts a quarter as long as a whole note is a quarter note. The pattern continues with eighth notes, 16th notes, 32nd notes, 64th notes, and so on, each type of the note being half the length of the previous type. A rest stands for a silence in music. For each kind of note, there is a written rest of the same length, as illustrated. Note lengths work just like fractions in arithmetic. Two half notes or four quarter notes last the same amount of time as one whole note. Flags are often replaced by beams that connect the notes into easy-to-read groups. You may have noticed that some of the eighth notes in this diagram don't have flags. Instead, they have a beam connecting them to another eighth note. If flagged notes are next to each other, their flags can be replaced by beams that connect the notes into easy-to-read groups. The beams may connect notes that are all in the same beat. Each note will have the same number of beams as it would have flags. The notes connected with beams are easier to read quickly than the flagged notes. Notice that each note has the same number of beams as it would have flags. Even if it is connected to a different type of note, the notes are often, but not always, connected so that each beamed group gets one beat. This makes the notes easier to read quickly. You may have also noticed that the note lengths sound like fractions in arithmetic. In fact, they work very much like fractions. Two half notes will be equal to, or last as long as, one whole note. Four eighth notes will be the same length as one half note, and so forth. Whether a stem points up or down does not affect the note length at all. There are two basic ideas that lead to the rules for stem direction. One is that the music should be as easy as possible to read and understand. The other is that the notes should tend to be in the staff as much as reasonably possible. Stems of notes are turned downwards on the left side of the notes when the notes are above the third line of the staff. They are turned upwards on the right side of the notes when the notes are below the third line. Notes on the third line may have either their stems turned either upwards or downwards. Here are some basic stem direction rules. For single notes, notes below the middle line of the staff should be stem up. Notes on or above the middle line should be stem down. 2. For notes sharing a stem, or block chords, generally the stem direction will be the direction of the note that is farthest away from the middle line of the staff. 3. For notes sharing a beam, again, generally you will want to use the stem direction of the note farthest from the center of the staff to keep the beam near the staff. 4. For different rhythms being played at the same time by the same player. Clarity requires that you write one rhythm with stems up and the other stems down. 5. Two parts for different performers written on the same staff. If the parts have the same rhythm, they may be written as block chords. If they do not, the stems for one part, the higher part or first part, will point up, and the stems for the other part will point down. This rule is especially important when the two parts cross. Otherwise, there is no way for the performers to know that the low part should be read, reading the high notes at that particular spot. Rests are written in the third space of the staff. Whole rests hang down from the fourth line. Half rests sitting on the third line, and the top of the other rests in the third space. Rests don't necessarily mean that there is silence in the music at that point, only that the part is silent. Often on a staff with multiple parts, a rest must be used as a placeholder for one of the parts, even if a single person is playing both parts. When the rhythms are complex, this is necessary to make the rhythm in each part clear. The normal rule in common notation is that for any line of music, the notes and rests in each measure must add up to exactly the amount in the time signature, no more and no less. For example, in 3/4 time, a measure can have any combination of notes and rests that is the same length as 3/4 notes. There is only one common exception to this rule. As a simplified shorthand, a completely silent measure can simply have a whole rest. In this case, whole rest does not necessarily mean rest for the same length of time as a whole note. It means rest for the entire measure. A dot after a note or rest increases the value of the note or rest by 1/2. In other words, the note keeps its original length and adds another half of that original length because of the dot. So a dotted half note, for example, would last as long as a half note plus a quarter note, and a dotted quarter note would be the length of a quarter note plus an eighth note. A note may have more than one dot. Each dot adds half the length that the dot before it added. For example, the first dot after a half note adds a quarter note length. The second dot would add an eighth note length. A curved line connecting two or more notes of the same pitch is called a tie. When notes are joined by a tie, only the first note is to be played or sung, but it must continue sounding for the full value of all the tied notes. Rests are never tied. When these eight notes are played as written, only five distinct notes are heard. One note, the length of two whole notes, then a dotted half note, then another note the same length as the dotted half note, then a quarter note, then a note the same length as a whole note, plus a quarter note. Dots and ties give you much freedom to write notes of varying lengths, but so far you must build your notes from halves or other notes. If you want to divide a note length into anything other than halves or halves of halves, if you want to divide a beat into thirds or fifths, for example, you must write the number of the division over the notes. This usually subdivisions are called borrowed divisions because they sound as if they have been borrowed from a completely different meter. They can be difficult to perform correctly and are avoided in music for beginners. The only one that is commonly used is the triplet, which divides a note length into three equal parts. Let's do some exercise on the material of this lesson now. On your manuscript pad, draw the missing notes and fill in the blanks to make each side the same duration or length of time. I will also supply the answers so that you can check to see if you got it right. And here are the solutions so that you can check your work. For each note on the first line, write a rest of the same length on the second line. The first measure is done for you. I will supply the answers for you so that you can check your work. And here are the solutions so that you can check your work. Make groups of equal length on each side by putting a dotted note or rest in the box. I will supply the answers so that you can check your work. And here are the solutions so that you can check your work. Each week I will be giving a few musical terms for you to memorize.
This is the list for this week. Largo, slow and broad. Larghetto, not quite as slow as largo. Dolce, sweetly. Alla Marcia, in the style of a march.
I have a great many videos now on many different topics, and so I've decided to make several different video playlists so that it's easier to find the videos of greatest interest. So please check out my playlist page. Well, that's it for now. To stay up to date with my latest videos, make sure you subscribe to this free YouTube channel by clicking the red subscribe button right below this video. Take care.